Nearly 20 million barrels of oil pass through these waters every single day.
Every fifth barrel of oil consumed anywhere on this planet came through here. It is not a statistic.
There is no alternative route. The geography of the Arabian Peninsula leaves you with exactly one option. You go through the strait, or you do not go at all.
On the north, Iran. On the south, Oman and the UAE. For the men navigating these ships, the tension is a constant companion. The strait is narrow. The stakes are total. The engines of global industry run entirely on what passes through this strait.
Asian markets, China, India, Japan, are almost entirely dependent on this single route.
If someone closes this strait tomorrow, within 72 hours, you would feel it at every gas station in America, every power plant in Japan.
Engineers designed and built pump systems 3 times larger than anything that had existed before. The power requirements were staggering. Entire power generation facilities had to be constructed alongside the pumping stations just to supply the electricity needed to run them. Nothing about this project could be sourced from existing infrastructure. Everything had to be created from the ground up. The desert heat pushed machinery and men to their absolute limits. Equipment failures that would never occur in normal conditions happened regularly. Sandstorms shut operations down for days at a time. Supply chains were disrupted repeatedly. The timeline slipped, but the project could not be stopped. Because the alternative was leaving the world's energy supply exactly as fragile as it had always been. Year by year, the project advanced. What had been raw mountain rock was becoming the most significant piece of infrastructure ever built by human hands. Controlling the flow of 2 different seas required precision engineering that had no precedent. The lock gates were the largest ever constructed, each one weighing thousands of tons and moving with millimeter precision. The system was tested 10,000 times in simulation before real water ever touched it. At the terminus on the Gulf of Oman, a massive new deep water port was constructed. Deep water docks designed specifically to hold the world's largest supertankers. A new gateway for global energy built from nothing in empty desert. When the first sections of canal began filling with seawater, engineering teams watched in silence as the water rose to its designed level. Years of concrete and steel meeting the sea for the first time. The bypass itself instantly became the most high-value target on Earth. Air defense systems were established every few miles along the entire route. The most immediate threat was not physical, it was digital. Hackers from multiple state actors continuously probed the canal's automated control systems from the day construction began. Analog fail-safes were built into every single critical system as a result. The political war was intense from the beginning. Nations that had built their entire foreign policy leverage around controlling the Strait of Hormuz woke up to find that leverage being systematically eliminated. Insurance rates for passing through the old strait skyrocketed as the bypass neared completion. The market had already decided. The bypass was the only safe bet. Capital moves faster than politics always. Opening day arrived. The first vessel entered the channel and history was made. Precision maneuvering guided the enormous tankers through the rocky gorge. Simultaneously, the bypass pipeline began pumping millions of barrels of crude oil directly to the open ocean. No choke points, no blockades, no single point of failure. The system worked exactly as designed. The Strait of Hormuz grew quieter. Not empty, not irrelevant, but no longer the only way. For the first time in modern history, global trade had a route that no single nation could unilaterally close. Energy security brought economic stability that had been impossible to achieve, while a single corridor controlled the world's supply. Around the new terminal, entirely new economic zones exploded into existence. what had been empty desert became a global logistics hub. The bypass did not just move oil. It created an entirely new center of commercial gravity that drew investment, manufacturing, and services into a region that had previously been empty desert. $100 billion. Millions of tons of earth moved. Custom machinery built from scratch. Thousands of workers from dozens of nations operating in the harshest conditions on Earth. Human ingenuity defeating hostile geography. The bypass changed the map. It changed the economy. It changed the strategic calculations of every government whose foreign policy had been built around controlling 21 miles of water. The Strait of Hormuz was bypassed, and global trade was secured. This is the true power of mega engineering, not concrete and steel, not tunnels through mountains, but the permanent, irreversible change in what is possible. When human determination commits fully to a problem, even geography itself can be defeated. This is the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow corridor of water just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. And every single day, the fate of the global economy passes through it. Nearly 20 million barrels of oil make this journey daily. From Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the UAE, and Iraq. All of it funneled through this single fragile passage. 20% of the entire planet's liquefied natural gas moves through here as well. The sheer scale of what depends on this waterway is almost beyond comprehension. For the men navigating these ships, the tension is a constant companion. The traffic is relentless, a 2-mile wide lane in each direction, and they are never sailing alone. Military escorts are a daily reality in these waters, but the question that kept energy planners and military strategists awake for decades was always the same. What happens if this single lifeline is severed? The answer was always catastrophic. If the strait closes, the world loses a quarter of its seaborne oil overnight. Global energy markets would instantly collapse into chaos. Prices would skyrocket. Economies would grind to a halt. Asian markets, China, India, Japan, are almost entirely dependent on this single route. Without this fuel, the factories of the East stop producing. Hundreds of millions of jobs depend on what flows through 21 miles of water. The tanker wars of the 1980s proved exactly how fragile this system truly is. For decades, militaries wargamed the closure of Hormuz. Thousands of naval mines could seal the strait in a matter of hours. Keeping it open requires a massive, permanent international naval presence that costs billions every single year. But reliance on military force and diplomacy was always a fragile strategy. The world needed something more permanent. It needed a way out. The geography of the Arabian Peninsula offered exactly one solution: a bypass route cut straight through to the Gulf of Oman, bypassing Hormuz completely. The question was whether anyone had the will and the resources to actually build it. The price tag was announced, and it stopped rooms full of experienced engineers cold. $100 billion. More than any infrastructure project ever attempted in human history. The machinery required did not even exist yet. It had to be custom built from scratch. The route ran directly through the Musandam Peninsula, some of the most unforgiving terrain on Earth. Jagged, ancient granite mountains, extreme desert heat, unstable geology. Nature had built its own fortress here, and it was not going to give way easily. Before a single machine moved, every inch of bedrock had to be mapped. Survey teams worked in temperatures exceeding 45 degrees Celsius, charting terrain that no engineering project had ever faced at this scale. The data coming back was intimidating. Rock density unlike anything previously encountered. Fault lines running through the mountains in patterns that made planning enormously complex. The blueprints called for miles of fortified concrete and steel. The structure had to withstand extreme desert heat, sandstorms, and shifting tectonic plates. The ground beneath was unpredictable and hostile. The only way through the Hajar Mountains was brute force. Millions of tons of granite shattered in carefully sequenced blasts. The earth-moving phase alone cost billions before a single meter of canal had been dug. The scar across the desert grew visible from space. They were literally reshaping the surface of the earth, moving more material than the Panama and Suez canals combined. Phase 2 was constructing the megastructure itself. Lining the canal required a continuous concrete pour lasting months. Stopping even briefly would compromise the structural integrity of entire sections. Every batch of concrete was tested before it went into the forms. Zero tolerance for error. Where they could not cut a trench, they bored straight through the mountains. Teams working in extreme heat deep underground, advancing meter by meter through solid granite. Inside that mountain, in peak summer, the ambient temperature alone exceeded 40 degrees before machinery heat was added. Workers operated in shifts of 2 hours on and 2 hours recovery. The human body simply cannot sustain more than that in those conditions. Alongside the canal, a parallel network of ultra-wide crude oil pipelines was constructed simultaneously. Millions of tons of steel shipped in from manufacturing facilities across the globe. Every inch of every weld was X-rayed and stress-tested. A single bad weld in a pipeline carrying millions of barrels of crude oil at pressure is a catastrophe. The pipelines were inspected with an obsessive precision that reflected exactly what was at stake. To push 20 million barrels of oil uphill through the bypass required pumping stations of a scale never previously constructed by human engineering. The largest pumps previously built anywhere on Earth would not have been sufficient.